It is not even a stretch to say that 2026 could end up being the strongest year for game releases in the entire industry, not just for PS5, but overall. Just watch this video to the end and you will see exactly what I mean. Here I have put together 20 brand new top-tier games that are officially confirmed to launch on PS5 in 2026. What's up guys, it's Broz and here we go. And we're starting with one of the most anticipated games of 2026, which has already passed 1 million wishlists. Phantom Blade Zero is a story-driven action game that S-Game calls Kung Fu Punk. Wuxia attitude, Hong Kong fight choreography, and a grimy industrial edge. The story runs on a hard countdown as you play as Soul, an elite assassin framed for his master's death. He's badly injured in the manhunt, and a healer keeps him alive with a cure that only buys him 66 days to find who set him up before time's up. Director Soulframe Liang rejects easy labels and says the game borrows level design from Souls games and aggression from hack-and-slash classics, but the team calls it soulslikes and keeps navigation readable with a map. Progression leans into builds instead of grinding, letting you equip 2 main weapons and 2 secondary weapons, then chase upgrades and keys and locks that open secrets in earlier areas. S-Game promises over 30 weapons and 20+ phantom edges, with boss weapons and signature techniques becoming part of your arsenal. Phantom Blade Zero lands on PlayStation 5 and PC on September 9th. Fable is targeting a fall 2026 release, and surprisingly, it's coming to PS5 too. The biggest takeaway from Developer Direct is that game is not locking you into the one heroine model that dominated earlier trailers. Playground confirmed proper character customization, including the option to play as a male or female hero, with edits focused on things like head presets, skin, hair, tattoos, and scars, rather than a super granular body sculptor. Fable came out of Developer Direct with a lot more clarity than it has had in years, and the standout detail is how the game treats freedom and consequences without forcing a main quest sprint. The opening pushes you out into Albion after your village gets hit hard, but the designers stress there is no ticking bomb. The story waits while you go live your life, take jobs, mess with side activities, or build a reputation the slow way. And that reputation system is the big mechanical change. Morality is not a single good or evil slider. It is built around what people actually witness you doing. Then each settlement tracks you through a cloud of labels that can differ place to place. Do something dumb in public and it sticks. And the town crier can even be paid to push a new reputation to overwrite an old one. The team talks about a living population of over 1,000 NPCs with roles and daily routines, and they even had to solve problems like towns being empty since people lived too far from their jobs. Combat is built around fast swapping between melee, ranged, and magic with what they call style weaving, so it is meant to flow instead of locking you into one lane. 007 First Light is IO Interactive's first full James Bond game, and it is a rare case where the studio is both developer and publisher on a huge licensed name in games. Rather than chasing a specific film era, IO is building a standalone origin story where Bond starts young, enters MI6's training program, and earns his 00 status through missions that mix stealth, gadgets, and direct action. With Amazon MGM Studios involved on the franchise side, the design goal is easy to spot if you know IO's history. Hitman made its name on sandbox stealth and systems that reward improvisation, and IO has been framing Bond missions as something closer to that style than a straight shooter. The official framing also leans into classic Bond pillars like M, Q, and Moneypenny, but it keeps the continuity new and lets IO introduce original allies and threats around Bond. It is also the first new Bond game since 007 Legends in 2012. The one calendar update that actually matters is the delay. IO moved the game off its earlier March target and locked the release for May 27th, which makes it one of the first big tentpoles of the year. Crimson Desert leans into the messy fantasy stuff that big action games usually skip. You are leading Cliff and the Grey Manes across Pywell, and the moment-to-moment loop is built around combat that can swing from dirty brawls to full boss duels. It is framed as a mercenary road trip where loyalty keeps getting tested. Previews have called out a perfect dodge that can flip defense into momentum, plus a grab system that lets you wrestle control of a fight, even turning an enemy into a hostage when things get crowded. Pearl Abyss has also shown a lot of toy box energy in the action itself. Cliff can call in cannon fire with special arrows, smash ramparts, and use elemental effects like fire that weakens structures before you break them apart. Movement looks equally aggressive, with hovering bursts by space in a mob, and fights that reward using the environment, not only combo strings. Outside the clashes, the studio keeps stacking distractions that feel like real downtime. Fishing is in, arm wrestling is in, cooking is in, and horse breaking is a thing. So the pacing is not only combat and cutscenes. Forza Horizon 6 finally locks in Japan as the new festival playground, and the new info from developer Direct leans hard into car culture, not just pretty scenery. Tokyo City is positioned as the biggest urban area the series has done, with dense districts and a lot more vertical driving than the last games. And the whole map is built around contrast: tight city streets, mountain lanes, coastal stretches, and rural backroads. The coolest additions are the systems built around hanging out, collecting, and building. Car meets are a real feature now, inspired by the famous Daikoku-style gatherings, where you roll in, check out other builds, grab designs, and even buy a copy of a car you like. Exploration has its own loop too, with a collection journal inspired by stamp collecting, turning landmarks and little discoveries into progression. There is also the estate, a bigger property you can slowly restore and then use as a creative space, including building your own custom track for friends. And the game even calls out earning money through odd jobs like delivering tofu. At launch, they are talking about around 550 cars, plus new events like Touge battles and drag meets. The PlayStation 5 version is planned for later in 2026. Marvel's Wolverine is being sold on one clear promise: Insomniac is not sanding down Logan. The latest official details lean hard into close-range claw combat, with cuts that feel fast and ugly, and a level of blood that matches the character's comic reputation. Liam McIntyre is both the voice and the performance capture for Logan, and the team says they are chasing his rage and pain, not a polished hero pose. What stands out is how the game treats violence as a mechanic. Logan builds momentum with berserker-style aggression, then unloads with rapid, fluid attacks that can dismember enemies or break them outright, while his healing factor keeps him moving through punishment. The cast list is already spicy too. Mystique is confirmed, Omega Red is in, and at least one Sentinel prototype shows up, with the Reavers filling the role of a militarized enemy force. The story angle stays personal. Logan is hunting secrets tied to a dark past that refuses to stay buried, and the trip is set up like a global chase that can move between Madripoor, the Canadian wilderness, and Tokyo. Control Resonant exists because Remedy went all in on owning its own universe. After years of publishing deals, Remedy bought back the control rights from 505 Games in 2024, and this sequel is being self-published, with Annapurna Pictures co-financing and co-producing as part of their partnership. That move gives Remedy more control over scope and timing. Instead of returning to the oldest house, the story shifts to a warped Manhattan on the edge of paranatural collapse, and the playable lead is Dylan Faden, who was central to the first game but never the hero. Remedy's own description frames it as an action RPG, with more choice in how you approach missions, more room for optional content, and builds that come from abilities and gear rather than a level grind, while Remedy also calls it newcomer-friendly. Combat shifts, because Dylan uses a shape-shifting weapon called the Aberrant that can swap forms mid-fight, and Remedy is leaning harder into close-range pressure with bigger melee emphasis alongside the series' signature powers and reality-tearing visuals. The game was announced publicly at the Game Awards 2025, and Remedy has positioned it as part of its connected universe. Hell Let Loose Vietnam is being positioned as a full standalone entry, and Team 17 has been blunt about that because the community worried the World War II game would be sidelined. The Vietnam project is led by Expression Games, while the original Hell Let Loose keeps its own support track, and the publisher has said the two tracks will run in parallel. The setting shift forces real mechanical changes, not just new uniforms. Official details point to 50-on-50 matches between US forces and North Vietnamese forces, with dense jungle, open paddies, beaches, and hills replacing European towns. Maps are built around heavy river networks, so boats matter, and helicopters are also part of the toolkit, with air mobility reserved for the US side while the opposing side gets tunnel building. With 6 maps planned at launch overall, the biggest authenticity flex is the Royal Armouries collaboration. Team 17 and Expression Games announced a formal partnership with the UK National Collection of Arms and Armour, using reference access to support weapons, kit, and historical texture, and the studio has already been showing side-by-side comparisons of in-game models versus real examples. The Blood of Dawnwalker is the debut of Rebel Wolves, a studio formed by veterans of The Witcher 3, and their pitch is a narrative sandbox that refuses to freeze the world around you until you feel ready. It is a dark fantasy action RPG set in 1347, with plague and war as the backdrop, and the main character Cohen split between two lives, human by day, vampire by night, with each side opening different movement options and combat approaches. The most talked about design choice is how time works. The story gives Cohen 30 days and 30 nights to save his family from a vampire takeover, but the developers have explained that the clock advances through meaningful decisions and key actions, not just because you are wandering around. That creates pressure without turning the game into a constant sprint, and it makes priorities matter. Rebel Wolves has also been direct about consequence. The studio says important NPCs can die, including by Cohen's hand, and the story is built to adapt rather than fail a questline and reset. Combined with politics, brutal trade-offs, and the day-night split, it is aiming for choices that feel sharp. Resonant, A Plague Tale legacy, takes the series in a new direction by stepping away from Onimusha and Hugo and moving backward in time. It is set 15 years before Requiem and puts the focus on Sophia, the plunderer introduced in the last game, which immediately shifts the tone from family survival to a more adventurous, high-risk life on the run. The setting choice is the biggest surprise. Focus and Asobo place Sophia on Minotaur's Island, and the official description leans into myth and fate alongside combat, puzzles, and chase pressure. That is a sharp pivot for a franchise known for grounding its horror in human cruelty and the rat plague. So the new angle is less about repeating the same tragedy and more about expanding the universe into stranger territory, with notes also mentioning time shifts into ancient Minoan times. The game puts Sophia's skill set at the center of a loop. She is a survivor who steals, fights, and improvises, and the pitch suggests a heavier emphasis on direct combat than the earlier entries, with less reliance on stealth-only tools. Dune Awakening is already out on PC, so there is hard feedback feeding into the console version. When it clicks, it sells the daily pressure of Arrakis through heat, water discipline, and the risk of calling a sandworm every time you sprint across open sand, while base building and crafting keep the long session rhythm going. It has also been a loud live game so far. Players have pushed back hard on balance, exploits, and performance swings, and Funcom has had to admit when changes landed without clear notes. A recent flashpoint was an update that made enemy NPCs dodge far more often, which many players said broke melee, and the studio said the behavior would be rolled back, then reintroduced later with broader tuning. Funcom has been adding safety nets like a base reconstruction tool, vehicle backup, and character transfers, which reduce the pain of rebuilding after mistakes, server moves, or long breaks. In the latest official newsletter, the studio says internal console builds are going well, while the focus is smooth performance and full controller support, which suggests the port is being shaped around comfort. Lords of the Fallen earned a sequel the hard way after the 2023 reboot launched rough and then got rebuilt in public through a long patch run. The big version 2.0 era was the turning point, bringing shared progression for co-op, a free friend pass concept, and a pile of combat, movement, and quality of life fixes that changed how the game feels day to day. That post-launch cleanup matters going into the follow-up, since CI Games is already targeting a 2026 sequel and the official pitch is evolution, not a reset. Brutal combat stays central, the two-world structure is staying, and the studio is framing it as a bigger dark fantasy step forward rather than a new direction. Off-screen, the conversation has also gotten noisy for reasons that have nothing to do with mechanics. After public comments from CI Games leadership about rejecting political correctness and leaning into a more provocative character aesthetic, that instantly pulled attention toward culture war headlines instead of pure gameplay talk. What matters most is whether the sequel ships close to the late version 2.0 baseline, with co-op that holds up, systems that feel finished on day one, and no repeat of another year of emergency rebuilding. Housemarque is not trying to make Returnal again with Saros, because the whole spine of the game is different. Instead of a clean reset loop, Saros is built around permanent progression, so each run on Carcosa changes you, and the next attempt starts with more options rather than a blank slate. The studio is still leaning on that fast, precise third-person action, but it is tying it to long-term build growth instead of pure roguelike repetition. You play as Arjun Devraj, with Rahul Kohli in the lead role, and the planet itself is framed as a place under an ominous eclipse that keeps warping what is in front of you. Combat has its own Housemarque flavor, including the Soltari shield that can absorb and throw back projectiles, plus Carcosan power weapons that are meant to feel like big momentum swings when a run clicks. There is also a second chance system in the official feature list, which hints at a designed comeback moment. Even the tone is different from Returnal, because Saros is being pitched as a more personal story with a more grounded lead, while still keeping the studio's signature chaos on screen. Saros is currently scheduled for April 30th. Bungie finally put a hard date on Marathon, and the details make it clear what kind of game this is trying to be. It is an extraction shooter, so the tension is built around entering a run with gear, grabbing what you came for, and getting out alive. Because death can mean losing what you carried. The setting is still that classic Marathon universe vibe, but the structure is modern. Runners are basically mercenaries, contracts push you into risky zones, and other squads are part of the same space whether you want the fight or not. One interesting change is how Bungie has been talking about readability and fairness, because a lot of extraction games die by confusion. Bungie has highlighted features like solo queue support, proximity voice chat, and systems meant to keep encounters legible instead of turning every death into a mystery. Pricing has also been confirmed at $40 for the standard edition, which is a notable move in a genre that often hides behind free and then sells everything around it. On PlayStation 5, Marathon launches on March 5th, and it is confirmed to support full cross-play and cross-save across all platforms. This LEGO Batman is aiming for big toy box energy, but with a surprisingly deep Batman cut behind it. The pitch is a brand new story that pulls from different eras, so you can go from classic gadget detective stuff to full-scale chaos with vehicles and boss fights, without being tied to one single movie or one single comic run. A major selling point is the suit count. The game advertises 100 different bat suits, and they are not just skins. Different suits come with different gear and abilities, which changes how you clear rooms and solve puzzles. Gotham is also not just a menu hub this time. The Batcave works as a real base with its own build-out, and the wider city is designed for free exploration with side content, collectibles, and villain trouble that can pop up outside the main missions. The villain lineup is built like a greatest hits list, and the game is also pushing bigger set pieces, like heavy vehicle segments, chase moments, and LEGO-style slapstick that still keeps the combat readable. The quiet appeal is that LEGO games tend to live or die by pacing, and the studio is clearly trying to keep missions varied instead of repeating the same hallway brawl format. LEGO Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight is currently dated for May 29th. Capcom bringing Onimusha back in a full new entry is already a statement, but Way of the Sword has a specific detail that makes it feel unusually deliberate. The protagonist is Miyamoto Musashi, and Capcom chose to model him on the late actor Toshiro Mifune, which meant they had to negotiate rights and approvals, with Capcom saying it took about 2 years to get that permission locked. That casting choice is a real production commitment, and it shapes the whole look and presence of the lead. The game is aiming for stylish, grounded sword combat built around timing, parries, and brutal close-quarters exchanges. It is still Onimusha, so the supernatural angle is part of the identity, but the presentation is leaning into atmosphere and weight. The devs have also said the project has been in production since 2020, and that goes a long way toward explaining why the reveal felt confident instead of like a quick nostalgia grab. So even before you get into monsters and Oni powers, the most interesting part is the craft. Capcom is treating Musashi like a film character, with monsters and Oni powers built around that, and the whole thing reads like a careful reboot. Resident Evil Requiem is doing the classic Capcom balancing act, because it is built around two very different playstyles in one package. One side is Grace, an FBI analyst who is not framed as a super soldier type, so her sections lean hard into fear, resource stress, and survival horror pacing. The other side is Leon, and his gameplay has been shown as much more aggressive, with flashier kills and faster combat tempo, which instantly sparked debate about how brutal and action-forward Requiem is willing to get. The details that stand out are the knobs you can turn. Capcom is letting you switch between first-person and third-person perspectives, and the game also has difficulty modes that change the feel a lot, including a standard classic option where saving can require ink ribbons, which is a throwback that older fans will recognize immediately. All of that adds up to a game that is clearly trying to please both camps at once, the slow-burn horror crowd and the loud Leon action crowd. On PS5, you will be able to play Resident Evil Requiem on February 27th. Team Ninja is widening the structure in Nioh 3. The game is built around open field areas instead of the old mission corridor rhythm. That means the flow is less about selecting a stage, and more about pushing through a connected zone with fights, detours, and discovery. while still keeping the series' identity of brutal duels and knowledge-driven combat. The other big change is the two-style system. You can switch between samurai and ninja styles, with samurai leaning into head-on weapon pressure and ninja leaning into speed, trick tools, and more slippery movement. Style shift is more than a quick stance swap. One press changes your stats, weapons, skill set, and even your look, so it feels like you are carrying two builds and flipping them on the fly. The guard game got a real reward loop. A last-second guard triggers deflect, refills ki, and charges both your arts and ninjutsu gauges, so clean defense feeds your offense. Team Ninja dropped a demo a week before launch, so you can try the game for free and see how it feels. Marvel Tokon is one of those why has nobody done this exact combo projects, because it is Marvel characters, but built by Arc System works with that anime-style clarity and explosive pacing. The core twist is the 4-on-4 format, where you build a team of 4, but the match does not start as a full chaos tag fight. Early on, you are controlling one main fighter and using assists, and then you unlock deeper team options mid-match through specific conditions, so the round escalates in a controlled way. Arc has also talked about lowering the entry barrier without killing depth, with design choices like simplified inputs for some moves while still keeping spacing, matchups, and combo knowledge as the real skill ceiling. In hands-on previews, people keep pointing at how readable it stays even when it gets loud, which is a big deal for a team fighter. The game has already had closed beta tests, and the dev team publicly talked about aiming for long-term support, basically treating it like a platform they want to run for years. Roster talk is already part of the hype, with characters like Iron Man, Captain America, Storm, Star-Lord, and Dr. Doom shown early. And the bigger story vibe is that this is Sony and Arc trying to build their own forever fighter inside the Marvel space. Grand Theft Auto 6 has already lived through more public milestones than most games get after launch. Rockstar confirmed a major leak tied to an illegal network intrusion back in 2022, then went silent for long stretches, then finally locked in dates twice, ending with an official move to late 2026 for extra polish. The concrete part is the setting and the duo at the center of it. Rockstar is putting the series back in Vice City and spreading the story across the wider state of Leonida, with Jason and Lucia getting pulled into a conspiracy after an easy score goes wrong. The map is built to bounce between very different vibes, from bright city strips to coastal islands like the Leonida Keys. Scale is the point, even if Rockstar stays quiet on real budgets. GTA 5 has generated about $8.6 billion since 2013, and Take-Two reports nearly 13,000 full-time employees, most focused on development, so the machine behind 6 is massive. Rockstar's current release date is November 19, 2026, and we hope there will not be any more delays this time. Aphelion is a rare case where the collaboration itself is part of the game's identity, because Don't Nod built it in partnership with the European Space Agency. The premise is set in 2060, with Earth becoming uninhabitable and humanity putting its hope on a distant planet called Persephone. So the Hopo 1 mission sends 2 astronauts, Ariane and Thomas, to survey it. The story hook hits fast when the mission goes wrong and the 2 leads get separated, and the game design leans into that by letting you play both perspectives, with each character dealing with different pressures on the ground. The tone is not pure action power fantasy, because the ESA angle pushes a more believable survival vibe, harsh terrain, limited resources, and the kind of isolation where a small mistake can spiral. Don't Nod also frames it as an action-adventure with stealth and exploration, not a straight shooter, which lines up with how the studio usually builds emotion into movement and environment. ESA even published material around the fictional Hopo 1 mission, leaning into the idea that real science and real mission culture shaped the fiction. Drop a comment with the releases you're most excited for. Hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next ones. Also, check out my other fresh picks on the channel too. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.